Hello, my name is Taylor Ross. I'm an Aximmetry ambassador and the owner of Frustum Virtual in Los Angeles, California. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to set up virtual screens in Unreal Editor for Aximmetry. You can then easily control the content of these screens in Aximmetry DE Composer. I will quickly open Aximmetry DE Composer to show you what I'm talking about. I have this overlays compound that ships with Aximmetry DE Composer. This compound will allow us to set up all of our virtual screen content. It also allows us to easily manage the screen content and the overlays of our scene. I have this compound connected to the screens that I set up in Unreal Editor for Aximmetry. In order for the overlays to work, you also need to connect the overlay pin to the AR overlay of our camera compound. If I select my Overlays tab at the top, you'll see that I have Virtual Screen 1 and Virtual Screen 2. We can easily change our screen content by selecting any of these videos. We can also go full screen on any of the content that's currently playing on our virtual screens. We can turn on and off the logo in the upper right hand corner. We can also create custom crawls using text documents. These would resemble anything that you would see on a live television broadcast show. This is just a quick example of what we will be setting up in this tutorial. Start by opening your Unreal Editor for Aximmetry or any project that you'd like to add virtual screens to. For this tutorial, I'll be starting with an Aximmetry blank project. On the left-hand side, I'll select Film, Video, and Live Events. I'll make sure Aximmetry blank is selected, and then I will give my project a name. I'll call this Virtual Screen, and then I'll select Create. The first thing I'll do is change my layout. Navigate to Window, Load Layout, UE4 Classic Layout. Navigate to the Content folder. Now right-click in the content browser and create a new folder. Once you have a new folder created in your content browser, you need to give it a name. I'll call mine Virtual Screen 01. Double-click on this folder to open it. There are two different ways to create virtual screen content in Unreal Editor for Aximmetry. One is with a level blueprint and one is with a normal blueprint. Both of these techniques will require that we create blueprint logic to tell Aximmetry DE Composer what we are trying to do with these screens. The first thing we need to do is create a material. So in our virtual screens folder, I will right-click and select Material. We'll give this material a name. I'll call mine Virtual Screen 01. Now we can double-click on our new material to open it. With the material selected, we're going to navigate to the Details panel on the left-hand side. Change the shading model from default lit to unlit. Now we can right-click anywhere in the material. We need to create a new texture, so I will search for Texture Param. We're looking for the Texture Sample Parameter 2D. Go ahead and select that. Now we need to give this Texture Sample Parameter 2D a name. I'll call mine Virtual Screen 01. You can give this texture any name you want. It's just very important that you remember exactly what you name this texture, because we'll be using this texture name in the blueprint that we're about to create. So just be sure that you remember the name of this texture. Now we can drag off the RGB pin directly into the emissive color of our material. Once we've made this connection, we can hit apply and save in the upper left-hand corner. The next thing I like to do is replace this default texture. This default texture makes it a little bit harder to understand which way is up and which way is down. I'll go ahead and close my material, navigate back to the virtual screens folder that we created. I'll right-click, create a new folder for the textures that I'm about to import. We can name this Textures. Double-click on this folder to open it. Now in our Textures folder, I will right-click and select Import to Game. The textures that I'm about to import, I created in Photoshop. I'll just navigate to the location of the textures that I created in Photoshop and I will import them to my game. If you don't have Photoshop, you can use any image. This is really just to help with the placement of the screen in our virtual scene. The default texture that is on the material that we just created is a little bit hard to tell which side is the top and the bottom. So using a texture that you create makes it a little bit easier when you're placing your screen in the virtual scene. So now that I have these three textures that I created in Photoshop in my project, I can apply them to the material that we just created. I'll navigate back to my virtual screens folder, double-click on my Virtual Screen 01 material, select the texture that we plugged into our emissive color. In the Details panel on the left-hand side, I'll scroll down to the Material Expression Texture Base, and I will change this texture to the 1920 by 1080 texture that I just imported. Once I update the texture to the texture that I want to use, I can hit apply and save in the upper left-hand corner. I can now close my material. Now we need to add a plane to our virtual scene. In my Place Actors tab, I will search for a plane. I'll drag this directly into my virtual scene. This plane is going to be acting as our virtual screen, so I need to change the material of the plane to my virtual screen 01. With our plane selected in our details panel, we will change element 0 to the material that we just created, virtual screen 01. With this material selected in the content browser, I can use this arrow to update the material that's on this plane. So now the material of this plane should be my 1920 by 1080 virtual screen 01. I'll just get a better view of this so that we can make sure that the screen has the proper material on it. Now I'll change the rotation and position of this plane. This is one of the main reasons that I changed the texture. If we would have left this as the default texture, it would be really hard to understand which is the top and bottom of the screen. By replacing this texture, we know that the plane is in the proper orientation. Now we need to make sure that this plane has the proper aspect ratio. The plane is currently a perfect square. We want something that resembles a 1920 by 1080 television. There are a few different ways that we can make sure that our plane has the proper aspect ratio. We need to adjust the scale. In the scale values, we could change our X and Y to be 1920 by 1080. Using these large values is not recommended because the plane will become too big to see. So instead of using the value 1920 by 1080, I'm going to use the value 1.92 by 1.08. These values will give us the proper aspect ratio without making the screen so large that we can't see it. If I quickly show you what I'm talking about, I can lock my scale and change this to 1920. Now you can see that the size of our plane is extremely large. So if you wanted to start with 1920 by 1080, lock this lock and then change it to 1.92, you would get the same results that you see here. Now I'm just going to change the position of our screen and put it somewhere that we actually want it to live for our virtual scene. Now that we have our screen created, we need to work on the level blueprint, the logic for Aximmetry DE Composer to understand that we want this to be something that displays our content. So to open the level blueprint, we'll come up here, select Open Level Blueprint. I'm going to drag this up and dock it next to my project. Once we have our level blueprint open, the fastest way to create this level blueprint logic is to go to the Aximmetry documentation. You can create this level blueprint from scratch, or you can copy paste it directly from the Aximmetry documentation. There will be a link to this documentation in the description of this video. I will scroll down in the Aximmetry documentation until I find the section labeled Set Up a Blueprint. This is the blueprint that we are trying to create in our level blueprint. Just below these two screenshots, there is a box with Begin Object in it. If we click in this box and hit Control A on our keyboard and then Control C to copy it, we can then navigate back to our level blueprint and hit Control V to paste this blueprint. It's really great that Aximmetry provides these blueprints for you in the Aximmetry documentation, so it will save you a lot of time to just copy paste this rather than build this blueprint from scratch. Now we just need to make sure that the logic in this blueprint is referencing the materials that we set up in this tutorial. The first thing you'll need to do is find the Create Dynamic Material instance. We're going to change this parent to the material that we created. Use this dropdown and you can search for the name of the material that you created. Mine is called Virtual Screen 01, so I will search for that and select it. I will just quickly show you that. I'll go to my content browser. It's called Virtual Screen 01. So this is the material that we created. Now we need the name of the texture. So I'm going to go ahead and select the texture and then copy this parameter name. Navigate back to our level blueprint and find the Set Texture Parameter Value. Change the parameter name to the name of the texture that's in your material. So since I just copied that, I can Control V to paste it into the parameter name. So our Create Dynamic Material instance has been set to the material that we created, and the Set Texture Value is set to the texture that we have in that material. Below the Create Dynamic Material instance, we have Get Aximmetry Video. The name of the Get Aximmetry Video is the name that will be displayed in Aximmetry DE Composer. You can change this name if you'd like. The last thing I'm going to cover in this level blueprint is the element index of set material. The material that we created at the beginning of this tutorial only has one element value. If we select the plane, go to our details panel, you can see under materials that we have element 0 with our virtual screen texture. Some static meshes that you may be working with will have multiple elements under materials. So in our level blueprint, under this set material, we need to make sure that the element index is set to the material that we want to replace. Mine is set to element index 0, but keep in mind that you may need to change this element index depending on the static mesh that you're working with. The last thing we need to do is add the plane that's in our scene to this level blueprint. Currently, our blueprint has an unknown variable. If I hit compile and save, it will generate a warning in our compiler results. We need to replace this unknown variable with the plane from our scene. Navigate back to our scene. In the outliner, we will find the plane. Now we are just going to click and drag the plane directly from the outliner into our blueprint. With the plane that will be acting as our screen added to our blueprint, we are just going to click and drag off of this pin and connect it to this target. We can delete the unknown variable and then hit compile and save in the upper left-hand corner. Our compiler results should not show any warnings or errors. I'm going to redock my level blueprint. We can navigate back to our Unreal Engine scene. The last thing we need to do is add our Aximmetry camera. So I'll navigate to Aximmetry, add camera. We're going to add the green camera, virtual plus tracked. This will add the mixed camera to our Unreal Engine scene. You can see that both of my Aximmetry cameras have been placed at the 0 point of our world. I'm going to select this player start and delete it. Now for the final step in this project, I'm going to select the floor and search for custom. I'm going to turn on render custom depth pass for the floor. I'll do the same for my screen. There's another tutorial on the channel that covers this render custom depth pass. Go ahead and check that video out if you'd like to learn more about render custom depth pass. There's also a bunch of different tutorials that cover all the different camera types and compound types in Unreal Editor for Aximmetry and Aximmetry DE Composer. So if you need help setting up your Unreal Editor for Aximmetry project or your Aximmetry DE compounds, be sure to check out all of those different videos. We cover all of these different camera types. Since we have this project set up, I'm just going to navigate to the Aximmetry tab, and then I'm going to select Cook Content for Aximmetry DE. Once the cooking is complete, we can minimize our Unreal Engine project, minimize our documentation. I'm going to navigate back to Aximmetry DE Composer and launch it. Go ahead and select Start. In the interest of time, I'm going to fast forward through the setup of this compound. If you need help setting up your Aximmetry DE compound for the first time, be sure to watch our other tutorials on the channel that cover all the different cameras and compound types for Aximmetry DE. In this tutorial, I'm only focusing on the setup of these virtual screens. With our compound completely set up and our new Unreal Engine project loaded, you'll see that at the bottom of our Unreal Engine project, we have this plain display. The labeling of this plain display pin is generated by our Unreal Engine blueprint. The Get Aximmetry video node has a name called plain display, which we can now see in our Aximmetry compound. In order to get a video to display on our virtual screen, we need to plug something into this pin. I will add one of the stock videos that comes with Aximmetry directly to our compound, and then I will click and drag from the out and connect it to our new pin. You should see that this video is now being displayed on our virtual screen. This method should work if you only have one video that you want to display on your virtual screen. If you have multiple videos and you want more control of what's displayed on this screen, you navigate to Common Studio, Compounds, Overlays. Find the compound labeled Overlay 2Screen Vid In Logo Crawl Green. Drag this directly into our compound. You'll see that this adds an Overlays tab at the top. Now we just need to connect the Virtual Screen 1 pin to the Plain Display pin. With that connected, we can navigate to the Overlays tab at the top. By default, the Virtual Screen 1 section will be blank. I'll right-click and reset this. You can simply drag and drop the video that you'd like to play on Virtual Screen 1 into this section. In order to get the overlays to work, like our logos and our lower thirds crawl, we need to navigate back to the Flow tab at the top, click and drag from the Overlays pin to the AR overlay on the left-hand side of our Mixed Cam Unreal. That will enable the ability to add our logo and our lower thirds crawl, just like what was showcased at the beginning of this tutorial. I will quickly showcase this functionality by navigating back to the Overlays tab at the top. We need to add video to our virtual screen. I'll just navigate back to the video folder that's provided by Aximmetry DE. I can then click and drag these video files directly into Virtual Screen 1. With these videos added to Virtual Screen 1, I can now select any of the video files, and they should update on the virtual screen that's in my scene. On the far right side of Virtual Screen 1, you will see Full. This will make the content that's currently playing on your virtual screen full screen. I will select Full, and then I can turn on the logo, which will appear in the upper right-hand corner. I can also press play on this crawl node to begin the crawl of our lower thirds text. I'll select stop on our crawl. You'll also notice that there's this videos tab at the top. This is for full screen video. So on virtual screen 1, if we're not in full screen, we can switch between our live virtual scene and any full screen video using this videos tab at the top. We also have this insert section. Feel free to play with all the different functionality of this overlays tab. I'm just going to right click and reset our inserts. I'll navigate back to our flow tab. So now that I've showed you the process of setting up a virtual screen using your level blueprint, I want to showcase how you can do this in a standard blueprint or a standalone blueprint. Basically, we can use the same blueprint logic outside of the level blueprint. By creating a standard blueprint outside of the level blueprint, we will be able to use multiple screens that have multiple different video displays. We will also be able to migrate this blueprint to different projects, and we will only have to do the work once. I'm going to select stop on our Aximmetry compound to save on the processor. I will minimize my Aximmetry project and navigate back to my Unreal Engine project. Go ahead and open your level blueprint if it's not open already. The logic that we copied from the Aximmetry documentation can be placed into a normal blueprint. I will select this blueprint and hit Ctrl+C on my keyboard. Now I can navigate back to my main scene, find my content browser. We're going to go into the virtual screens folder that we created. Inside this folder, I'm going to create another new folder. We'll call this BP Virtual Screen 01. The BP stands for blueprint. Once you've created this folder, you can double click on it to open it. We're going to right click in this folder and create a new blueprint class. For the type, we're going to select actor. Now we need to give this blueprint a name. I'll call mine BP Virtual Screen 01. Now we can double click on this blueprint to open it. Now inside of this new blueprint, we're on the viewport, so you can see the viewport. In the components section, we're going to select add, and we're going to search for a plane. Double click on the plane to add it to our viewport. Now if we navigate to our event graph, this is where we will put the blueprint logic that we currently have in our level blueprint. Before I add this blueprint logic, I need to create a new material. I'll navigate back to my blueprint folder. This is BP Virtual Screen 01. I will right click in this folder and create a new material. I will give this new material a name. I'll call it BP Virtual Screen Material. You don't have to name it this, you can name it whatever you want. Just make sure that it's something that you will easily remember. Go ahead and double click on this new material to open it. Now, just like before, we need to change the shading model from default lit to unlit. We need to right click in our material and search for texture parameter. We're adding a texture sample parameter 2D. Give this texture a name. You can do it over here next to parameter name. I'll call mine Virtual Screen 02. I'm going to replace this default texture with a texture that I imported at the beginning of this tutorial. Now I need to connect the RGB to the emissive color. Select Apply and Save in the upper left-hand corner. Now we need to apply this texture to the plane that we added to our blueprint. So I will select the plane in our blueprint, find element 0, and then I will replace this material with the material that we just created. I'll just search BP. There's my material, I'll select it. Now I can position my plane in my blueprint. I will just rotate this 90 degrees. I can move it up a little bit off the floor. Adjust the scale so that the aspect ratio is correct. Just like before, I'll change my scale to 1.92 by 1.08. Looks like I accidentally chose the wrong texture for my material, but I'll change that in a second. We can select Compile and Save in the upper left-hand corner. Now we can navigate to our level blueprint, copy the logic, Control-C, open the virtual screen blueprint that we're working on, navigate to the event graph, hit Control-V on our keyboard in our event graph to paste the blueprint logic from our level blueprint to this blueprint. Now we can add the plane from our components, click and drag it directly into our event graph. You'll notice that if we try to connect our plane to this target, it will not allow us to. We can skip these two variables by just clicking and dragging from the plane directly into the set material target. Once our plane is connected to the set material target, we need to change this parent value of the create dynamic material instance to the material that we just created. I will search for BP Virtual Screen and select it. I also need to update my set texture parameter value. I will navigate to my BP Virtual Screen material. We don't want the texture for Virtual Screen 01, so I'll navigate back to my folder. I'll find my BP Virtual Screen material, and I will copy this parameter name, Control-C on my keyboard. Now I can navigate back to my blueprint and replace the set texture parameter value with Virtual Screen 02. I will also update my Get Aximmetry video node. I'll change this to Plain Display 2. Now I will select Compile and Save in the upper left-hand corner. With that blueprint all set up, I will navigate back to my scene, and I will simply click and drag this new blueprint directly into my scene. I'll just quickly reposition this blueprint so that it looks directly at my camera. I'll move it up a little bit off the ground, and I will also reposition my old virtual screen. Now, as you can see, I've used the wrong texture. I'm just going to quickly fix this by opening the BP virtual screen material, selecting the texture, and changing it to the 1920 by 1080. We need to select Apply and Save in the material for it to update in our scene. So I'll select Apply and Save. So now back in our virtual scene, you can see that we have two virtual screens, one that has been created using our level blueprint, and one that has been created using a standalone blueprint. Both of these blueprints will function in the exact same way because they both have the exact same blueprint logic. Building this blueprint logic into a standalone blueprint will make it a lot easier to migrate this screen to different scenes. That way, if you need to add a screen to any scene, you can just migrate this blueprint and then update the materials and textures. If you find yourself adding a lot of screens to your virtual scenes, this will speed up the process because you won't have to do the work over and over and over again. It will be done once and you can just migrate it to the new scene. If you're trying to set up multiple screens with different content on each screen, you will just have to create new materials and new blueprints for each screen. You can duplicate the blueprint that we just created and then update the parameters for create dynamic material instance and set texture parameter value. Also make sure that you update the name in the Get Aximmetry video so you can differentiate what video goes to what screen. Each blueprint that you create will need a unique material and texture. I will just quickly save my project. Then I will navigate to Aximmetry and select Cook Content for Aximmetry DE. Once the cooking process is complete, we can minimize our Unreal Engine project. Navigate back to Aximmetry DE. This is the compound that we already set up. I'm going to select Play at the top. Once the Unreal Engine scene loads back into our Aximmetry compound, you will see this chain at the top. We can select this chain to update the changes that have been made to our Unreal Engine project. We should now be able to see Plane Display 2. We can click and drag from Virtual Screen 2 to Plane Display 2. Now we can navigate to our Overlays tab at the top. We can add some more of the stock footage to our Virtual Screen 2. There should now be video on your second virtual screen, and just like before, we are able to switch between content on that virtual screen by selecting the clip that corresponds to each screen. This is a very powerful way to switch between content on our virtual screens in our virtual scene. A lot of what we've covered in this tutorial is advanced, so if you're just starting out with Aximmetry DE and you need help setting up your compound or your Unreal Engine scene, we have videos that cover all of this information on our channel. If you'd like more detail on any of the things that I've covered in this tutorial, be sure to leave a comment on this video. You should now have a pretty good understanding of how to set up virtual screens in Unreal Editor for Aximmetry and how to control them in Aximmetry DE Composer. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos, and thanks for watching.